Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the UNODC Blockchain Hackathon launch webinar. On screen is Jennifer Gitu from the UNODC, David Robinson from the UNODC as well, and myself, Daniel Kimoto from C Labs. I think I'll have Jennifer introduce herself and then lead us through this next session.
Okay, so I hope you can all clearly hear me. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you for putting this together. And despite the early morning, I appreciate the people who've made it this morning. So my name is Jennifer Gidu, as have been introduced, and I am a program assistant at the regional office for Eastern Africa of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. I know that sounds like a mouthful. We've simply abbreviated to UNODC ROEA, and I work in the countering corruption pillar, where we do a lot of anti-corruption related work and programming. And this is one of our, of our most interesting projects. And I'm actually excited this morning that we're finally doing this. And I think this session will mark the beginning of the hackathon. I think officially we'll start counting the 4 weeks today. So allow me to just introduce briefly the work that we do, and also just briefly introduce the hackathon, and after which then I'll allow David Robinson, who's the regional advisor, anti-corruption advisor for Eastern Africa, to simply speak to you guys about the thematic area for the thematic areas for the hackathon and some of the challenges that we face. So UNODC covers the regional office for Eastern Africa covers 13 countries, and in the region, and by way of name, I'll just briefly name them because I know some of our participants here are from these countries. So we have Burundi, Comoros, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, Mauritius, Rwanda, Seychelles, Somalia, Tanzania, and of course Uganda. And this is covered under the regional program for Eastern Africa 2016 to 2021, which allows UNODC to provide tailored technical assistance activities to member states, and among other things, to promote the implementation of various UN conventions, one of them being the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which is the convention that David and I work to implement in the region, and also taking it, the assistance also takes various forms, and one of which is, working directly with young people, like this hackathon is attempting to do. So the hackathon is a 6-week marathon. For the last 2 weeks, we've been recruiting participants and developers from the region, and as of this morning, I think I can confirm we have over 150 applications. So that's what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks. We launched on the 12th of October, and the permanent secretary, the principal secretary, sorry, I'm still stuck in the old regime. The principal secretary for the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth launched the hackathon on our behalf, and offered, amazing government support in terms of, first of all, stating what the government in Kenya is doing with regards to, new technologies and promoting young people and through their use of technology, etc., and also sort of offering support in the upcoming hackathon and in future activities. So that was wonderful. So the hackathon will target young people from 8 countries, which are Burundi, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. I think we have seen applications from Burundi. We've received applications from Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda. So I think that that's representative enough. I hope we can still get something from South Sudan and Djibouti with due time, but with Djibouti, I understand the language the language issue could be a barrier. So we look into that. The objectives of the hackathon are to promote the awareness of the Convention Against Corruption. We understand that not all young people might understand what the convention entails, the purpose of the convention, and what their role within the framework of the convention is. So we hope to promote awareness. Secondly, is to promote youth participation in the fight against corruption in their countries. So as young people develop these software solutions that could be instrumental in the fight against corruption in their countries, we are in a way promoting participation in the solution provision for some of the daunting challenges around corruption. Then obviously, since it's a hackathon, we hope to promote innovation and tap into that, resource that is developers and tech people in the region. We understand that Eastern Africa is a bubbling tech hub on the continent. I think it comes only second to our Southern African friends. So we want to tap into that and tap into the innovation that young people have already espoused, and also just promote that. In the long run, we hope to develop a UNODC tech hub and sort of incubate and accelerate some of these ideas that you brilliant people have. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we hope to achieve. The competition will entail young people identifying their application and designing that that application that they wish to present to the panel of judges. Then afterwards, they will work with mentors, mentors drawn from different partners that we have. So we're talking about IBM, CILO, Kotani, etc., and UNODC. And these mentors will help them develop the ideas so that the ideas are feasible and they're workable in the long run. And also, we hope to promote the achievement of our sustainable development agenda. Those are the SDGs. So we will be asking what SDG your idea fits into. So that's an important element. And in the end, we'll receive presentations. I think that will be twofold, and then there will be an adjudication process, which will culminate in an award process, which we hope to do on International Anti-Corruption Day, which is observed every year on 9th December. So participants will receive a range of prizes, ranging from merchandise to hardware to research grants by some of our partners. And also, we get to profile the top ideas on our site, and also, get the top ideas to be the initiators of the UNODC Tech Hub in the long run. So, with those many words, I would like to invite David to briefly speak about the thematic areas that I think I did not mention, which are whistleblower protection, financial investigations, and public procurement. And then after that, we will answer any questions. Sorry, any questions, and then after that, we'll allow you to lead with the activities that follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so you'll no doubt be relieved to hear that I'm going to attempt to be brief and to borrow from Dorothy Sarnoff. At the very least, I'll endeavour to finish speaking before my audience has finished listening. So just a little bit of background about what I do. So I'm the Regional Anti-Corruption Advisor for UNODC. Well, what does that mean? Well, UNODC has a corruption and economic crime branch, and the role of CEB, as it's called, is to provide tailored technical assistance to states in support of the implementation of the UN Convention Against Corruption and related mandates. So that covers a variety of different things that we do. So it's legislative drafting, national policy and strategy guidance, technical training, and other capacity building activities. And we also publish a wide range of material concerning corruption and how to address it, both in developing jurisdictions and beyond. UNODC also has what you might call an international normative role. So we are the secretariat to the UN Convention. It's quite important. So we set international priorities in the field of corruption through something called the Conference of State Parties, which was created after the convention was initially signed in 2003. And we administer the implementation review mechanism, of which Kenya and all of the other participating jurisdictions in the competition is part. Now, the use of IP in the fight against corruption is, I think, one of the most interesting and rapidly developing areas of our work. And the use of blockchain is one very important element of that. Now, you may recall at the launch of the hackathon, if you were there on Monday the 12th, that the entries to the competition are to be based on 3 themes. So they are public procurement, financial investigation, and whistleblower. Why those 3, you may ask? Well, they were decided as regional priorities during a series of UNODC organised conferences held in the region between 2016 and 2018. The heads of anti-corruption authorities from 8 East African jurisdictions came together and reached agreement that the above 3 thematic areas, plus 1 more, which we won't be dealing with in this competition, were priority areas for the region. And each of those themes corresponds to an article or articles in the UN Convention Against Corruption, to which every participating jurisdiction, so that's Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Djibouti, South Sudan, is a signatory. The project which arose from this early work, and which importantly pays for me to be here in Kenya, is something called the Fast Tracking project, which is paid for by the UK government. In addition to that, I am the head of what's called the East Africa Countering Corruption Pillar. So I do additional work. So all of the other jurisdictions that Jen mentioned in the introduction, I provide technical assistance to. So generally speaking, anything which falls outside the Fast Tracking project falls within the regional pillar. And that includes initiatives such as this one, the East Africa Youth Blockchain Competition. And we decided at an early stage that the competition needed to have a particular focus for the entries, because simply asking for corruption-themed entries was unlikely to be specific enough. It seemed appropriate then to use thematic areas which had already been identified as being regional priorities and to build on that synergy. So, what the issues is in the field of, say, public procurement, but blockchain may assist with. Well, going back to basics, I suppose, Article 9 of the UN Convention requires states to take the necessary steps to establish appropriate systems of procurement based on, these are important words, transparency, competition, and objective criteria and decision-making, and that they are effective in preventing corruption. Now, the use of blockchain for improving public procurement systems is a rapidly growing area, and arguably it needs to be. Fraud and corruption in public procurement is a huge problem, particularly in developing countries. Now, every year, according to the OECD, an estimated $9.5 trillion is spent on public sector contracts and large public investment projects. And bearing in mind that the vast majority of those public sector contracts and investment projects are issued by way of public procurement, and you get some idea of the scale of both the challenge and the corruption. In fact, it's estimated that corruption adds up to 10% of the total cost of doing business globally, and up to 25% of the costs of procurement contracts in developing countries. I mean, it's a staggering figure, an extra quarter of the price just to deal with corruption. So E-procurement is something which some of you may have heard of. In fact, Kenyans have been talking about e-procurement for some years now. And basically what it refers to is the use of an internet-based inter-organizational system that automates and integrates parts of the procurement process. And that's with a view to improving efficiency, transparency and accountability in the wider public sector. So by transferring these otherwise centralized and opaque processes of procurement to the internet, e-procurement promotes transparent and efficient information flows and increases accessibility for prospective vendors and civil society. Obviously, if they want to check on who's been winning contracts and who hasn't. So any or all of the procurement process can happen on an electronic platform. So that can be advertising, tendering, bidding, awarding, purchasing, ordering, contracting, invoicing, or any other forms of project management. Now, blockchain could add critical value to public contracting up to the delivery of the goods and the services by locking in critical information at every step of the procurement chain that can be monitored, tracked, and audited. There are e-procurement programs in Bulgaria, Estonia, Macedonia, Portugal, Turkey, a number of different European and Eastern destinations, but perhaps more significantly, close to home, Rwanda has a very successful e-procurement program. And I noticed from what Jennifer was saying earlier that we have entries from Rwanda to the competition, which is very encouraging. Kenya has a form of e-procurement, though I think it's fair to say its success has been limited because of a number of technical and other reasons. So, back to investigation. How can blockchain help with that? So, as the volume of data online increases and financial services become increasingly digitized, there is huge pressure on banks and payment companies to protect financial data from criminal activity. And while the generation of enormous volumes of data is actually an asset for business as they strive to deliver better and more personalized digital services, there's also sensitive information that can potentially fall into the wrong hands. And today, the threat from financial crime comes from multiple bad actors. So that's organized crime, rogue nations, and cause-motivated activists, as they're called, as well as more traditional hackers and rogue company employees. A 2018 study estimated that only 0.5% of all transactions reviewed by bank compliance officers in fact led to a criminal investigation. And consequently, only 1% of criminal proceeds, and this was an EU study, in the EU are confiscated. Now, so that means 99% of the money stolen through financial crimes in the EU is not traced. Now, some of the benefits of blockchain technology in enabling financial services to better protect data include the following, and these will be familiar concepts to those of you who are developers. So data is accessible from a single location in real time, so it's easier to monitor and report on than, say, a siloed system. Data is immutable, so it can't be changed. It's chronologically stacked and stamped, and it's encrypted. And importantly, it's transparent for regulators and law enforcement. Now, a shared ledger as a single source of truth that's immutable, secure, traceable, and auditable would be a significant upgrade over existing digital infrastructure. The nature of blockchain also enables the technology to be the facilitator of what we call a federated digital identity. So while capturing and logging consumer consent for any transaction involving the collection, sharing, or storing of data. In other words, nothing will happen without that consent. Interestingly, there are also tools in development specifically to investigate blockchain. So we all know that blockchain and cryptocurrencies offer significant benefits as tools for peer-to-peer asset transfer, but they're also susceptible to misuse, again, by bad actors. So as blockchain becomes more widely used, a specific set of tools is needed for investigative agencies and financial institutions to track criminal behavior. So, for example, there's a product called Crystal, which was developed in 2018, which is a tool for law enforcement investigators and financial institutions. And this has the ability to link pseudonymous Bitcoin payments to real-world entities. So it can identify ownership of Bitcoin wallets and connections between different blockchain entities, and so it can provide evidence for use by financial investigators. Moving swiftly on to the final category, so blockchain and whistleblowing.
Allow me to interrupt you, David.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a challenge with your audio. It's streaming quite with a lot of static. Do you mind trying again?
What, the whole thing?
Yes, maybe just starting from where you were giving the example of the application that was developed in 2018.
Okay.
Not okay.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, much better.
Okay. So Crystal is a product which was developed in 2018, which is a tool that's used by law enforcement investigators and financial institutions. So it has the ability to link pseudonymous Bitcoin payments to real-world entities. It can identify ownership of Bitcoin wallets and connections between different blockchain entities, and importantly, provide evidence for use by financial investigators. So moving on to blockchain and whistleblowing. So Article 33 of the UN Convention requires state parties to take appropriate measures to provide protection for any person who reports in good faith and on reasonable grounds to the competent authorities any fact concerning offences established in accordance with the Convention. And whistleblowing is one of those topics that you'll read about in the news, you'll hear about, you'll see online, and it's become increasingly important over the years. And perhaps the definition has broadened a little, so we understand a whistleblower to be anyone who speaks up about things that they believe to be wrong. Now, if we want to fight corruption before it happens, it depends heavily on early detection and exposure of acts leading up to, as well as the acts themselves of bribery, fraud, theft of public funds, and other acts of wrongdoing. Now, whistleblowers can and should be at the vanguard of that fight, but only if they're properly protected. We shouldn't expect them to stand alone and face the consequences of their bravery alone. And the threat here is not exaggerated. It's all too real. It's important to remember that corrupt public officials can have strong links to transnational organized crime and terrorism. So, for example, the judge or prosecutor who ensures that crucial exhibits in a case against a drug kingpin are mislaid. The provincial police chief who instructs his subordinates at the roadblock to let certain vehicles with armed men on their way from Somalia pass unhindered. And the member of parliament with links to drug traffickers who persuades the parliamentary committee on which he or she serves to oppose or dilute proposed legislation related to money laundering or other crimes. Now, while whistleblowers can thwart them, the protection of their anonymity is critical. And the right kind of anonymous reporting mechanism based on blockchain could be a really important development. Now, Given that over half of the world's population is an active internet user, it suggests that a viable way to self-monitor whether required by law or for internal practice is to facilitate an online reporting program. But of course, those online reporting mechanisms must be secure. Very important. And the integrity of the reported data, of course, is critical. Now, these are all challenges that a blockchain-based program could meet. You know what the qualities of blockchain are. You know what it's good for. You know what it's not good for. So, while I don't want to tell you what you should be doing, hopefully some of this guidance will push you in the right direction. Just as a small example, in Denmark, currently the government is examining the possibility of using blockchain as the basis of whistleblowing reporting mechanisms, so you won't be on your own. So I encourage you all to think creatively about your proposed solutions to some of these problems. We really look forward to seeing the result of your hard work over the coming weeks. And with 150 applications in already, I'm genuinely excited about what the next few weeks will bring. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and back to Jennifer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, David, for that introduction and good examples. I think we can go into questions. Daniel, if you're still around, you could perhaps guide us through some of the questions coming in from the participants, then we can answer appropriately.
Right, thank you, David, for the presentation and some of the ideas that you've given us today. I think there's some couple of questions that are coming in. There's a question tab on the crowdcast. So for the members of the audience who have any questions, you can post them on the question tab. You can also post on the chat, and we'll try and follow them. But on the question tab would be the most ideal place. So there's one question that has come in that asks, what kind of tech solutions have you seen from international best practices for public procurement?
Okay. Do you want me to answer questions individually, or do you want to put them together?
Yeah, I think because I feel we can answer individually as we go.
Okay. So, well, there's a real range. So in the area of public procurement, it's not new to use tech solutions. So as I mentioned in the presentation, Rwanda has developed a very significant e-procurement process, which I think is universally regarded as very successful. And a number of other African jurisdictions, East African jurisdictions, have looked at Rwanda's system and to see whether or not there are principles that they could apply from what Rwanda has achieved in their own jurisdiction, because I think it's important to recognize that there's no one size fits all with this. You have to take into consideration and full account local factors. So for example, the Kenyan e-procurement system that the government attempted to introduce in, I think, 2015 is not the same as the Rwandan e-procurement system. Now, you don't have to look much further than, say, South Korea to look at a very successful e-procurement system. And in fact, Rwanda spent some time considering the South Korean system before they developed their own with the assistance of the World Bank. A small but nevertheless important jurisdiction in Europe is Estonia. They effectively have an entire e-government set of arrangements, which includes e-procurement. So if you wanted to take a local example, though, I would point developers no further than Rwanda. Obviously, it's a different jurisdiction from Kenya, but the system they have in place there is hugely successful and considered to be an example of how to do something in Africa. So hopefully that answers your question.
That does, thank you. And there's a few more here. So I think there's one question that has come in that is asking what will be the implementation period or process for solutions developed during the hackathon. I think this one targets what happens after the solutions have been submitted, and perhaps there's some viable ones that you think have a place in the fight against corruption or in the thematic areas.
Well, it's a little difficult to answer because obviously until we know what the nature of the successful solution is, we won't know how long it would take to implement. Because obviously if it's something that provides a local solution to a local problem, then it might be a lot easier to implement it in, say, one of the counties in Kenya. If it's potentially a national solution to a national problem, then inevitably it will take longer. I think one of the things that I can say, though, is that we have support of government on this. And that's critical if we want proper implementation of anything that's developed in the course of the competition. We had the pledge from the PS that Jennifer at the start of the podcast, at the start of the webinar mentioned. And without that, this would not be as powerful and effective as I think it's going to be. So I realise that's a bit of a politician's answer. I'm basically saying I don't know how long it's going to take. But what I do know is that we have a real feeling of this taking effect. With 150 applications in already after 2 weeks. With government commitment to take this forward, and with all of the support from all of the partners to UNODC in this, I think that we're going to be able to tap into all of that ingenuity and energy that there clearly is in amongst East African youth, and I think we're going to have some fantastic stuff at the end.
Thank you for that, David. And there's a question here around whistleblower protection. So the question asks, how is whistleblower protection, how is witness protection or whistleblower protection done at present, and how would blockchain improve those, or the two of them?
Okay. First thing, it's important to distinguish between whistleblower protection and witness protection. So a witness protection program is something which government would ordinarily create with a whole series of structures and processes in place to back it. And essentially, you're talking about people who are about to give or do give evidence in criminal proceedings against suspects who are being tried for criminal matters. Sometimes their identity is protected, sometimes not. Sometimes when they're placed in the witness protection program, they have to be given fresh identities, and maybe sometimes even they have to leave the jurisdiction for good. We're not talking about that. That's a wholly separate thing. So whistleblower protection is ensuring that usually employees, whether in the private or the public sector, who witness acts of corruption or something which they're deeply suspicious of, have the ability to report this without fear of retribution. Now, that can be loss of job, it can be more serious consequences. We've seen whistleblowers in other jurisdictions lose their lives, lose their home, lose family members as a consequence of speaking up. So in essence, with the whistleblower protection, we're talking about protecting the anonymity of those people who wish to speak up. At no point are we saying, for example, that they have to give evidence against anybody. This is just about reporting. This is about indicating concerns. And as I may have touched upon in my presentation earlier, one of the most important things that we can do is, because so many people are active internet users, if we can use the internet as a means for people to report, that's obviously critical. But even more so, is making sure that those mechanisms are secure. And it seems to me that the blockchain is one of the most significant ways forward to make sure that we have that immutability. It can't be changed, but also that it's secure. Now, obviously, that would have to be some sort of private blockchain arrangement rather than a public one. But I'll leave you to put your thinking caps on around that. Let me put it this way: there are other blockchain-based reporting mechanisms, but I hope that some of you will go out and research those and maybe find some improvements on them. So, thank you.
Right, thank you for that answer. So there's more questions on the question tab, and there's one of them here that's asking, so what would you change in how financial investigations are done today? Perhaps integrating blockchain. Yeah.
Well, it depends on the nature of the financial investigation, I think. If we're talking about investigating a cryptocurrency that's being used for or by bad actors for bad purposes, then a tool that understands the way that blockchain works and understands its limitations and is able, nevertheless, to recover data from that is critical. If we're talking about, for example, the preservation of what's called the chain of custody in relation to evidence, that can, and I speak as a former criminal lawyer in the UK, the chain of custody in relation to evidence or exhibits is absolutely critical to the case, because if you can't demonstrate that, let's say an exhibit, let's say it's a hard drive or it's a weapon of some description, if you can't demonstrate where that's been throughout the entire process from the moment it was seized to the moment it's presented in court, then a defense lawyer, a crafty defense lawyer, can raise an argument that, well, this isn't the same weapon. They can argue that it's been tampered with in some way, and those arguments can be successful in court. So if we have a system based on blockchain, which is able to identify at every stage when something has been looked at and that data is immutable, that will be a real help forward. And I've witnessed myself a number of cases in a number of the different jurisdictions that I've worked in where chain of custody and faults within the chain of custody have been fatal to a case, an otherwise strong case. And so anything connected to that, I think, could be a significant improvement.
Well, thank you, David. So there's a question that asks how the UNODC will work to ascertain the information that is provided on these blockchain platforms. Does the UNODC play any role in this whole process, or once you hand over the solutions to the governments, you offer support to them, more of technical support, or are you part of the process?
If I understand the question correctly, our role is to obviously encourage this competition, to encourage young developers to bring forward ideas and reward them in the process of doing so through our partners. Now, that's all with a view to implementing the UN Convention, and in particular, those articles that I've already mentioned. Now, we as UNODC don't hold any rights over those products in any way. What we're doing is facilitating the process. So the winners, as government has already announced, will have their products taken forward in government. We will support that process, obviously, because we will feel a sense of responsibility having encouraged this. What we can't do is guarantee anything. Clearly, it's outside of our power. It's for national government to take it forward. But certainly, if we see merit in something, we would want to push that product. And as Jennifer again mentioned at the start of the webinar, what we would love to do is to develop, if you like, a tech hub as well. And so all of these ideas can be gathered together as potential for not only Kenya, but other jurisdictions. And a potential for the whole of Africa, in fact. My understanding is that we've had applications or requests from many jurisdictions, including those outside of East Africa. So there's clearly interest in this, and ultimately we would quite like to do something that has a broader scope than East Africa. But so going back to the original point, we can't guarantee or promise anything clearly, but we will be supporting once the competition is done.
All right, thank you very much, David, for that. Yeah, so I think we have exhausted most of the questions that we've had today. Thank you very much for the time you've made for this session. Is Jennifer still on the call? We can have a couple of announcements coming in for what the next steps are, what the developers will now start doing, because it's now coding week. Coding week starts. Let me just see if, all right. Yeah, so coding week starts this week, and further instructions will be given on email and on Slack where the developers are. Yeah, yeah, I don't think Jennifer is still on. Yeah, but I'd like to thank you for making the time and everyone for participating in this session. Oh yeah, here, Jennifer.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you, David, for enduring the 40-something minutes or so and answering the questions that have been raised. So I think the next immediate steps are so the team, the hackathon team, the hackathon organizing team, let me call us that, putting together teams and for the hackathon. So what will be happening is we'll be analyzing the skills, that's the the level of skill that you have when it comes to blockchain, the kind of ideas that are coming in and the kind of applications that are coming in, and we put together everybody in groups. So this will be communicated to you on Slack and on email. Also, there will be a series of other similar webinars, most of them which will be now tech-based, moving on from from this one. And I think Daniel, you can quickly perhaps just announce the dates, but I think everybody will also receive a calendar with everything that will happen for the next coming weeks. Yeah, I think those are the immediate announcements that I have. Daniel, you could just let us know the next dates for the next webinars or sessions, after which I think we will communicate with everyone now on Slack.
Certainly, Jennifer. Yes, Felix sent out an email last night with the calendar of events. So I think for all who have registered, you can check your email addresses and find the email from Felix with events. So we shall have an event tomorrow. That will be an ideation event where we will go over the process of coming up with ideas. This will also be communicated in advance. On Wednesday 28th, we'll have the Cello technical webinar event. So this event will happen on the same platform, Crowdcast. So this is Wednesday 28th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. East Africa time. We shall have a member from the C Labs team joining us and showing us how to build on the Summer blockchain, and then potential ideas that we can work on. And then on the 29th, that is Thursday, we shall also have a technical webinar by the team from IBM. So further communication will be sent out on Slack and on email, and also on text as you have been receiving it so far. So yeah, welcome everyone to the hackathon, and yeah, please bring forward all your ideas. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, David. I'd like to wish you guys an amazing rest of your day. Let's continue communicating. Bye-bye.